At LSI, we don't just follow trends, we help shape the future. Welcome to Behind the Win, the podcast where we break down the biggest moves in tech, innovation, leadership, and government contracting. Here at LSI, we're bringing you exclusive conversations with the minds behind groundbreaking advancements, disruptive strategies, and industry-defining wins. From retail to tech, defense to government solutions. This is where you get the insights to stay ahead. Let's go behind the win.
Welcome back to Behind the Win. Today we're talking about something that often determines whether a startup succeeds or struggles, and it's not always the technology or the funding. It's the ecosystem around them. The strongest companies don't grow alone. They're built through relationships, partnerships, mentorship, investment, and the right people opening the right doors at the right time. Joining me today is Patrick Driscoll, someone who has spent his career helping founders, investors, and innovation organizations build those connections and grow successful companies. Okay, Patrick, welcome to Behind the Win. We're excited to have you here.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So just to start off, let's tell our listeners a little bit just what you do today at Holland & Knight.
For sure. So I am the Director of Client Development for our emerging company and venture capital team, which essentially means I do two things. One, I manage our business development. So I'm out in the field traveling to one of our many offices in the US, LATAM. We have a lot of connectivity in Europe as well, meeting with founders, VCs, partners from our firm, strategic business development opportunities, etc. The second part of my role is I work closely with our clients, whether they be founders or VC fund managers, angel syndicates, family offices, to help them figure out either what their fundraising strategy might be, how they can better build out an investor relationship kind of framework or strategy as well. And I kind of equivalate myself to an investor in residence or an entrepreneur in residence when I'm chatting with clients in this regard. I'm not an attorney by trade. I'm a former VC fund manager and have been in the VC game for the better part of a decade. So I've helped a lot of folks raise a lot of money, and I'm bringing that skill set to Holland & Knight to the best of my ability.
That's amazing. So, and maybe just to jump right into it too, is like people hear the word ecosystem. I feel like it is, for the last few years, has been this buzzword, right, that everybody's talking about. What does a strong innovation ecosystem actually look like?
That is a great question. I've worked up in the Bay Area. I'm currently based in Los Angeles. I've been on teams called ecosystem development teams. And in prior roles, I've really done a lot of work kind of understanding how to build out ecosystems, right? So in my opinion and in my experience, in a strong ecosystem and what an ecosystem needs to be is really a network-driven market where there needs to be access to talent, access to capital, customers need to be available, and they all need to be embedded in either a localized geography or even something more horizontal across different geographies. There's many ways you can define an ecosystem. The point that successful ecosystems need to address is to make things more frictionless. And this is something that I heard earlier on in my career. So a good ecosystem, a strong ecosystem allows for faster introductions, faster diligence. You can get access to better deals. Capital is a huge component here. So there needs to be reduced friction when it comes to accessing capital. Who are the investors? Who are the capital allocators? And all this is essentially shortening fundraising timelines, go-to-market cycles, and it's gonna kind of self-perpetuate when it's successfully done to really create something that's going to be strong and long-lasting. And that's kind of how I define ecosystems at the end of the day is something that's creating less friction for all stakeholders.
Yeah, and I think I think that's a great definition. When I came from a background of banking for 25 years. I've been now in this government contracting, aerospace and defense for 5. But when I first came over, we have programs we run for SBA. They're called SBA RICs, Regional Innovation Clusters, basically an ecosystem around manufacturing, critical minerals, whatever that is. Yeah. I thought, why would competitors want to come together. To me, at first it was this foreign concept. So I love that you guys push this, that you teach this, this, because now 5 years later, fast forward, I can see whether it's car dealerships, if they all come together, whether that's for policy, whether that's for fun, different things that are happening, that they're stronger as a whole. Absolutely. So
it's a win-win. One of the overused metaphor of the tide that rises all boats is a successful ecosystem, right? So huge believer in.
Yep. What role should industry, universities, investors, and government play in helping founders succeed?
Yeah, I think a huge missing piece of many ecosystems is the capital. So investors are a huge part of what an ecosystem needs to aspire to have. And if there aren't investors in an ecosystem, then they need to figure out ways to create bridges to places where there are investors. Capital is just constantly constrained, right? And access to capital is consistently difficult. So that's a huge underlying foundation that needs to be available either locally or at least have some connectivity to capital. Industry needs to be aligned mostly for access to talent, access to business development opportunities, to customers. They need to be aware of what's happening, specifically in the context of early stage innovation. There are opportunities, whether it be life science or deep tech, national security, defense, frontier tech, where you can go to industry to get access to lab space, for example, to places where you can launch pilots, strategic partnerships, get access to advisors, mentors. A lot of these industries that are led by large corporates have venture capital groups themselves. And so they're constantly, the good ones are monitoring what the early stage market is doing and keeping their finger on the pulse to figure out how they can be involved. For universities, obviously talent, that's huge. You're spitting out really great either engineers, leaders, folks that can run companies, be CEOs. The best resources is oftentimes coming from these young, hungry, entrepreneurial type folks. And even as you get kind of later down the professional trajectory, there are executive education programs that help build out further skill sets from the university ecosystem. So universities are paramount. They have accelerator programs. Many of them also have angel syndicates for alumni to invest into these new exciting companies. And then finally, government. The government is oftentimes overlooked, and I think it's become even more important to note. Governments can really unlock ecosystem growth. Oftentimes, governments can overly regulate or get in their own way, and they'll come in with some onerous set of diligence parameters that companies have to go through in order to either get after government grants, non-dilutive funding. Politicians can think they're doing the right thing, but they're actually hindering innovation in many ways, and entrepreneurship and starting companies with whatever legal, policy decisions that they're making. And when you take a look at kind of the perfect ecosystem, when all of these pillars, the investors, the industries, the universities, and the government actors are all in harmony, or at least communicating with one another, then that's going to be the fastest way to unlocking an innovation ecosystem and an innovation economy that's scalable.
Absolutely. And when you say the couple of things is like the funding for a lot of companies that do the government work, right? It's that gap funding. Like you win a big contract, you've got to produce and push out X amount of volume, services, et cetera, before you get that first payment. And so, even 5 years ago, I think that concept to banks, we hadn't heard it a lot, right? We thought, a contract's binding. If they have a 5-year and it's, $50 million a year, that's pretty much, solid. So I think that is such a good thing to get people listening and understanding what VC can do for them, for sure. But then, also, we've seen in other countries where they kind of have that synergy you talk about with the ecosystem. We were just in Morocco, my team, in February, and they have, some of the big prime vendors that are funding their pool of colleges, like their tech schools and everything, and then providing them jobs. Like it's so much more intricate, where I think, Utah does a great job, but other places, for sure could come along with that as well.
Yeah, and venture readiness is something that is constantly being discussed right now with how difficult it is to raise money. And the valley of death, or the inability of many companies to raise capital at the early stage, can be circumvented by good government and university programs or involvement through non-dilutive funding, through angel checks from university syndicate groups, for example. Even industries can come in and really help companies scale up to the point where they're venture backable. And this has become more apparent, I think, more than ever in today's capital constrained world.
That's interesting. What, a lot of founders spend copious amounts of time perfecting their pitch deck, right? And we just came from a big conference that was held here in Ogden for aerospace and defense, where we had folks on our team that trained people to how to make that deck or one pager or your collateral look better. But what are investors actually evaluating that's beyond that presentation that you could share with listeners?
Yeah, right now there's a focus on the numbers, right? So previously, founders were able to raise on a really cool story, a cool background. Now it's really down to execution velocity is a phrase that I've heard often, where a founder can actually say something that they're going to do and then achieve it, which is proving that they basically put their money where their mouth is.
Right.
They can ship product, they can get traction, they can sell, they have numbers to back it up. That is, in my opinion, the easiest way to secure interest from VCs. It's numbers, numbers, numbers. Additionally, being very disciplined around capital efficiency. So if you have raised some money from friends and family, for example, how have you used that money? How can you indicate using financials or perhaps some sort of forecasts that you are going to budget accordingly and use capital efficiently in order to unlock growth, as opposed to spend at all costs, grow at all costs, which has historically been the narrative that a lot of founders have been told. Now it's a little bit different, where you need to use all of the capital that you get as strategically as possible. Then the final thing I'll say is there is still a little component of narrative creation, which is very important. And that is, in my opinion, around your ability to attract talent and retain talent. If you're a solo founder, or if you have a founding team of maybe 2-3 people, how do you know each other? How have you been able to attract each other? Do you have advisors that you've been able to attract? Are they actually involved in decision making? Are you chatting with them? Can an investor chat with these advisors? And are they high caliber? Are they coming from successful companies, or are they involved in government? Are they well connected? Are they involved in industry? So that's another huge component that I think founders really need to double down on right now.
What are some of the common mistakes you see the startups make when they're raising capital?
Great question. Actually teach a session at UCLA on Pitching 101, and I have this slide in my deck that pops up several times, which is don't lie. Founders sometimes like to, maybe not lie, but exaggerate.
Is it like, okay, I was like, I typically picture it as like they're elaborating and making it sound a lot better than it is.
Exactly. Or sugarcoat things that aren't necessarily as good as you are making them out to be. Oftentimes you need to get the hook, right? You need to wow an investor, and then they're going to diligence you. And if they uncover something that you have said is either disingenuous or not 100% accurate, it's just a no. VCs are trying to get to a no as quickly as humanly possible so that they can go diligence their next deal. And if you give them, that's the lowest hanging fruit, and it happens all the time. Founders are just trying to be a little bit deceivious, or disingenuous, I should say, mischievous, whatever the word is I'm trying to use, to get VCs to write the check. So that's number one. Number two, I mentioned debt equity. Messy cap tables is another easy reason that VCs will skip on a deal. Even if it's a great company or a great founder, oftentimes they don't want to deal with the headache, the legal legwork it's going to take to clean up a cap table. You're oftentimes going to have to buy out somebody to clean up the cap table. It's just kind of an annoying thing to see. And if you do have debt equity, it's smart to either chat with a legal partner. We do this type of work all the time to figure out how to clean it up, what you can do to be more attractive in that regard. Those are two kind of easy ones that are oftentimes overlooked, but I think I like to nail those on the head as hard as possible.
And I mean, would you say VC and that they would be similar? We have clients and folks that get funding, right? Whether that's grants or win RFPs through the government, and immediately, which, like you said, with you guys want to see growth, but immediately growth to them is hiring more people. Well, we've got, we've had consortiums that we started, and we did it with 3 people. And then when they grew into different funding and different organizations took them over, they wanted, 12. And so to us, we're like, hey, the government sees you were operating in using that money more towards, the public when you had 3 people versus 12. But do they see that? We know you need growth, but that always doesn't mean making your team bigger.
No, agreed. It does. It is kind of a hard equation to really figure out. How, when you raise capital and you tell an investor your use of funds, oftentimes it does include, I'm going to hire, a head of engineering or a head of sales. But what does it actually look like? And should you hire a CMO, right, versus a junior salesperson that can make all the calls that you're unable to make because you're too busy doing other things? Should you hire a head of engineering versus a junior engineer? There are hard decisions that founders need to make that can make or break. Or should you hire someone who's going to, be an AI expert that can unlock all of these amazing capabilities that AI has allowed companies to achieve, or to circumvent hiring talent? I do think it's an interesting time right now when you think about how companies are able to leverage new technology to get around some of these more mundane analyst type roles that exist at companies. And the growth at all costs, as I mentioned kind of earlier, is kind of in a bygone era in today's market. So it's a lot more strategic. Why did you hire this person?
How do founders, in your words, build those long-term strategic partnerships, instead of just only chasing that short win, right? Short-term wins.
Yes.
We try to tell them in terms of, right, if we do hook them up with VC or whatever, that it's a marathon, not a sprint. So
Always.
Just curious. Yeah.
Well, I always think about the companies that I've helped get access to capital via introductions. Even when I had my own VC fund, who I invested into, they were typically founders that I got along with, that I liked, that I believed in. And that started via a conversation or an introduction from someone else, right? Where I met them at an event and we had a great convo, we hit it off. Relationships it's such a relationship-driven ecosystem, the VC startup world. And just getting a VC to like you, or someone who's connected to like you and to believe in you, can unlock a ton of doors. So the marathon, not a sprint framework, I think is something that needs to be double clicked on over and over again. However, there is a timing component to part of this, and I'm working with a founder now about when is the right time to pull the trigger on getting some of these introductions. And he's of the mindset, this founder, that he just wants to chat, get them to like him so they know who he is. But you don't want to necessarily waste social capital on a conversation that's too early, because then you could turn somebody off and give them a reason to shut the door. However, when you have something, this is why you also need to understand who's on the other side of the conversation. So what does this investor look for? What do they like personally? I hate to tell folks, but kind of LinkedIn stalk people, see what they're posting, what they're liking, what are their likes, dislikes, and have a conversation outside of your company, meaning, what are they interested in? What does their fund do? What trends are you seeing, VC XYZ? And really kind of pique their interest in other ways to build that relationship. The other thing I'll mention here that I used to work closely on, and when I ran an accelerator, was founders who had dream VCs. If they were going after, any of the really big specialized VC firms for their Series A, Series B, how can you map out via other investors to get to that VC. So who do they co-invest with? And then who do they co-invest with? That will be an easier play for you to get access to. So if you invest into early stage fund for your pre-seed, if you're able to convince this fund that then co-invests with a VC fund at the seed level, and then that they co-invest with your dream VC at Series A or Series B, that's a good way because they oftentimes syndicate deals, right? All of these VCs are sending each other their best deals. Right. So if you get into someone who has a relationship, and you can check out this data on PitchBook and some other Crunchbase and some other great resources to map out how you get to your dream VC if you don't have access yet. And we used to we would put these visual maps together for founders in order to figure out like what other institutional investors they needed to get access to finally get their dream investor, which is kind of a fun exercise. But it works out.
I think, I mean, and we talk about like another buzzword or not, but we're seeing more startups and investors that are paying attention in the space like that we're in, which is aerospace and defense, right? Even national security. What do you think is driving that shift?
It's I think a broader ecosystem movement, but it's funny. I got into national security and defense about 5 years ago, and it was very non-transparent, kind of underground. There were investor networks that would like meet in the dark of night to discuss national security and defense field. And then major VC funds, they didn't want to be associated with defense deals, so they would just kind of like send someone who wasn't high profile to see if there'd be good diligence. They wouldn't brag about them in kind of like PR announcements, but they were happening. But now I think with an alignment of industry, geopolitical implication, or whatever's happening in the geopolitical stage, and politicos who are involved now in like the tech and innovation sector in DC and at the state level, it's kind of a perfect time for national security and defense to finally come out of the shadows. And additionally, so that's kind of like a broader answer. A lot of folks thought that national security and defense was all hardware, and those timetables for returning money to LPs and to returning money to VCs was very long. Anything that's kind of hardware obviously has a longer cycle in order to return money to investors.
Right.
However, national security and defense has kind of expanded into a lot of scalable software and data infrastructure is now being labeled national security and defense. Or if it's a drone company, for example, or a hardware company, there are software components that are more attractive for VCs to sell to LPs so that they can actually invest into the space. So there's been kind of a movement in that regard. The final thing I'll mention is the access to non-dilutive funding, whether it be through federal programs like SBIR, or like you can get money from Department of Energy, you can get money from all these great programs that exist to allow companies to scale up to venture readiness. I think we're at a very fantastic inflection point for this money to get these companies to where they need to be. And yeah, it's also kind of like a marketing play. I feel like there's just been really good companies that have come up in national security and defense that have made a ton of money for a ton of investors, and investors are nothing but lemmings. And when they see that money is to be made, it becomes kind of an easier pill to swallow, where, as I mentioned earlier, it used to be kind of a cloak and dagger type of thing.
And based on that, you kind of mentioned a little bit of the challenges, right? Is like with the hardware, and if it had a software component that was more enticing to them. But what do you see as opportunities, these companies entering this market, what is an opportunity for them? And maybe even a couple more challenges too.
It's definitely a hype cycle, and we've seen this with a lot of other industries that hype cycles end. So are you going to be too late? It's already getting super inundated and competitive. I think a lot of drone companies, I use drones as kind of a good example because there's like 480 drone companies in the US right now. I'm sure since that number came out a couple of weeks ago, there's probably 50 more.
Right.
Not all of them are going to get VC funding. There's a lot of redundancy in the space. So that's another risk when you have these hot sectors. How do you really differentiate yourself? But then it's if you really take a look there's a company that I'm familiar with that works closely in nuclear energy. They took a look at the supply chain. They understand that nuclear energy is an important component of American resiliency, for example, and that there's interest in that space. They found one component of the supply chain that made sense for them to solve a problem for. And then because of their previous experience and their ability to identify a problem that was scalable, they launched a company and now they're absolutely crushing it. So if you're strategic about what you're doing in this broader national security and defense play and aerospace and energy and American resiliency and security, et cetera, then I think you can build a pretty attractive company.
Okay, so we've got a lightning round for you, just quick hits, like first couple words that come to mind for you. So most important trait in a founder.
I would say proven out adaptability. Yeah, if I love a founder that has either failed and their story of failure or success. Obviously, success is better than failure. But even if they failed, what did they learn from that experience to adapt to make sure that they don't do it again? And when they did have a successful company, what did they learn from that experience? How are they leveraging that and adapting from lessons learned into this new endeavor? Or if it's a first-time founder, tell me about a time that you learned from something and were able to pivot. Are you open to shifting the focus of your company? If someone is so rigid and not coachable, they're not adaptable, it's pretty apparent in the first couple of conversations you have. So it's something that I always try to tease out.
And I love that because we tell our clients too, you have to be able to pivot, right? If you, and the people, when you have a regime change at the administration level, the people that are nervous and anxiety about it are ones that, like you said, are very rigid and cannot pivot, right? They're going to have different goals, different views, different outcomes that they want to happen. And so you've got to be able to, we're not telling you to change the entirety of your product offering or service, but that you've got to be able to focus it towards, the right energy. Love that. Biggest startup mistake?
I would say co-founder mismatch is a big one.
Good one.
And early partner mismatch. So dating before marrying is important. How do you know these people? Are you able to work together? Have you worked together? Founders sometimes pair up because on paper they look good as a pair and they think that's enough, but then one leaves because of an annoyance with the other, or there's just unaligned or misaligned goals. So that's, I think, probably the biggest barrier or problem that folks run into. And it is kind of a crapshoot because you never know somebody that you could have worked with for 5 years in another company, and then you start a company with, you don't know what's going to come out. It's always interesting. Which is another reason why adaptability is important. You can adapt in your relationship with these people.
For sure. Most underrated resource for entrepreneurs?
Gosh, I'll say non-dilutive funding. I still come across so many founders that think VC is the be-all end-all. Not only non-dilutive funding, but project-based finance. There are debt opportunities. People never want to tap into friends and family because they feel awkward doing so. But if folks believe in you, they're going to hopefully give you some cash or at least introduce you to folks. But don't get bogged down in this narrative that VC is the one thing that's going to validate you. There's so many other plays out there, and it's just shocking to me how many founders I speak with that don't know that they can go to for a life science company, the NIH, or state, local, regional. There's grants.gov. There's so many opportunities for you to get access to funding.
One industry you're watching closely?
Energy. I think energy is very, very interesting right now. Battery, solar is kind of in a weird place, but I still think that there are some interesting things happening there. Renewable, we're doubling down in kind of the old school oil and gas under the administration. Nuclear is coming back, but there's innovation in all of these spaces, right? And we have at Holland & Knight, for example, we have a huge energy and natural resources team, and we're seeing so many cool plays from the early stage up until, later stage mid-market up to private equity, how these companies are engaging with the Department of Energy, with a variety of other actors, and it's cool. And at the end of the day, the world runs on energy, so it's hard to hard to
Overlook
avoid.
it,
Yeah.
for sure. Last one. What does winning look like for a startup?
Winning looks like, at the end of the day, taking a look around the room, being proud and happy with what you've built, being surrounded by people you're happy you built it with, not only co-founders, employees, etc., but partners along the way. I'm part of a law firm, a good law firm partner, a good accounting firm, having good service providers, your customers, obviously. And when you're able to kind of take a step back as a founder, specifically, take it all in and be content, obviously with bumps along the way, but you're happy with the folks you did it with, then I think that's a huge indicator of success. That and, making everyone a ton of money, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. Patrick, thank you for joining us and sharing your insights today on entrepreneurship, everything ecosystem, investments, and future of innovation. So where can people connect with you or learn more about your work or Holland and Knight?
For sure. So they can check out hklaw.com, which is Holland and Knight's website. Google Holland and Knight. We're a very large law firm with 2,300 plus lawyers across a variety of sectors and national security and defense. We have a whole built out team, a tech team, energy team, life science team. So doesn't matter what industry you're in, we will likely be able to help you out. I specifically sit in the emerging company and venture capital part of the firm, which kind of at the foundation level touches all of these verticalized teams. So it's a fun place to sit. And you can ping me at patrick.driscoll@hklaw.com. Always happy to get some inbound, and my number, I believe, is also available on the website, so feel free to give me a call.
We'll link it for sure.
Yeah, and if I'm kind of the quarterback, so if you have any questions about the firm, if you're a founder who is building in data centers, which is another exciting sector, obviously, right now, we have a whole data center team right now, and AI.
Man, we could do another episode just on data centers.
Yes, we could. Wild. I just spoke with a founder that's doing space data center infrastructure. It's crazy.
Wow.
I love it. I love it.
That is awesome. Well, Patrick, thanks for being on. We appreciate you.
Thank you.